kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
A ní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no kwa, Osinachi. Man, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi.
Hi, Taiwo. Hi, Marie.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Bud.
How you doing?
That's lovely. Nice to hear you. Fine, thanks.
Yes, and thank you so much for taking the time for this panel. Mm.
Oluwafemi?
Hello.
Yes, hello. Were you needing to test anything with us before we start?
Just a moment, please.
Okay. Okay.
I just want to. Can you hear me very clearly?
Yes, I can. I can.
Okay. Just to be sure that my stuff is working properly. Okay. I think I'm good to go. Let's see. Let me see my camera. It's working. Okay. I think that's fine. It's okay.
We can see you well. Yes, hello.
Hello. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Good evening,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you.
Oluwafemi?
Yeah.
It's a different, this is a different link from the one that attendees are using.
Yes, it's a
Yes.
different one.
Let me just make sure Fana has it. 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, I sent it to him already.
Did you send it again now?
It's to Fana
Just now?
about 10 minutes ago.
10 minutes. Oh, then you'll find it. Yes. Okay, Tom. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Hello.
good
Hi, Tom. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you all. How's it
Yeah,
going?
great.
And
We'll
hello,
start in the moment. I think we were just waiting for Abdul Malik and Fana at least to join us.
I'm
Sure they
sure
will join us. Yeah.
quite a few more people will probably join as well. How's the conference going?
Great. It's been good. It's been good, yeah. Hello, Professor Taibat. How are you? Okay. Yeah. So our participant, please,
Yes.
will start very soon.
Monica.
Just waiting for. Yeah.
Hi.
Just waiting for. Yeah.
Let me just phone Fana quickly.
Okay. So just waiting for two of our panelists as well to join us. So we'll start in a moment.
I should apologize in advance as well. I think I mentioned it to you, Oluwafemi, but I may need to leave a little early due to a pre-existing commitment. But
you said that. But good enough, you are presenting first. So
I went down first. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I should be here for most of it. So, but apologies to Taibat and everyone else.
It's understandable. Yeah. Thanks.
Oluwafemi.
Yeah.
Prof. Fana's area has just been scheduled for load shedding, so he's quickly taking his car through to campus because there's generator on campus. So we should start, and he'll join us. He's terribly sorry, but he's already on his way.
Okay, so we'll start right away so that it will join us as soon as it's able to. So it will join us. So,
that's right. Yes, he definitely will. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to welcome every one of us joining this evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you are connected from the part of the world. So it is my pleasure to co-organize this event, this panel, with two of my colleagues, Dr. Taiwo Afinowi of Witwatersrand University, and also Dr. Odumbaku Omo of UN Habitat, Nairobi, and I'm Oluwafemi Olajide. So we all co-organized this session in honor of Professor Taibat Lawanson, Professor of Urban Management at the University of Lagos. And you will agree with me, as many people that know Professor Taibat Lawanson. So we are doing a critical reflection of our scholarship and our contribution to the academic and professional world. And I want to say that Professor Taibat Lawanson she's a mentor and to young or younger and mid-career professional and emerging senior academic and in the professional world across Africa and beyond. So she's mentored a lot of people and she's still mentoring a lot of younger ones, which I am one of them anyway. So it's an honor for me to co-organize this session. And to do justice today is to reflect on our academic, our scholarship. We've got very interesting scholars in the house who will be talking about this. And I will introduce them at the appropriate time when we get to that time. So without so much further ado, I want to go straight into what we have to do today, which is a critical reflection of Professor Taibat Lawanson, academic contribution. But before we do that, I would like to read a citation. And when I read that, we go straight into our panelists so that they can reflect on this. So Professor Taibat Lawanson is a specialist in urban management and governance at the University of Lagos, where she leads the Pro-Poor Development Research Cluster and serves as co-director at the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development. She's an urban development expert and hold a PhD in urban and regional planning from the Federal University of Technology, Akure, Nigeria. Her research focuses on the interface of social complexities, urban realities, and the pursuit of spatial justice in Africa, a recipient of numerous academic awards. She has received research funding from DFID, DAD, Norwegian Research Council, and Rebirth Stiftung, British Academy, and the Royal Academy of Engineering, UKRI, Africa Multiple of University of Beirut, and Cambridge, Africa, funding among others. So Taibat current research serves as International Advisory Committee on UN Habitat flagship State of the World City report. Now, I just want to give a quick housekeeping. For those people joining us, there would be time where you will have opportunity to ask questions or comment if you want to. So, and feel free to put your comment in the question and answer or the chat area, whichever one that is comfortable for you or convenient for you. We will take your question at the appropriate time. So, and having said that, I want to go straight to our first panelist, who will be reflecting on Professor Taibat Lawanson's scholarship. So, and our first panelist is Professor Tom Goodfellow from University of Sheffield. So I will read his citation as well. After that, she will have the room to reflect. So Professor Tom Goodfellow is a professor of urban studies and international development at the University of Sheffield. His research focuses on the comparative politics, economy, and urban development and changes in Africa, particularly the politics of urban land and transportation, conflicts around infrastructure and housing, migration, and urban institutional change. His current and recent research in Africa has involved collaboration with a range of institutional partners, including Makerere University, Addis Ababa University, University of Lagos, Howard University, and Wits University. He is author of Politics and the Urban Frontier, Transforming and Divergence in Late Urbanization East Africa. So without so much ado, I want to hand over the role to Professor Tom Goodfellow to reflect on Professor Lawanson's academic contribution to the urban. Yeah, thank you. You have the floor now.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction, and it's wonderful to be on this panel. I'm very honoured indeed to have been asked, surprised and honoured, and thank you for that. I'm going first, I assure you, just I think because I have to leave a little early, not for any other reason, but it's great to kick things off. As you've just heard, most of my work has been in Eastern Africa, but I've had the good fortune to be working with Taibat on a number of projects recently, and also doing a little bit of research in Lagos myself a few years back. And I'm constantly kind of amazed really by Taibat's range, the diversity of the work that she does, and also the boldness really of the issues that she's tackling and the questions that she's looking at in the Nigerian context, like really blazing trails, I think, and leading the way in urban research and planning research on Nigeria and beyond. So just to give a bit of context in terms of my projects with Taibat, the main one at the moment is a project we're working together on around migration, urbanization and conflict in Africa, funded through the African Research Universities Alliance and the Global Challenges Research Fund. And even though I'll say a bit about Taibat's published work and the amazing range of things she's been involved in, just engaging with her on that project has been extremely educational and a great pleasure in terms of her ability to be extremely organized at the same point as offering this kind of intellectual leadership and remaining apparently kind of calm through various crises in the project, and really terrible issues around funding on this and other projects in terms of the funding not arriving in Nigeria and our university not passing things over, and difficulties between Addis Ababa and Nigeria and so on. I mean, she really has led the way in terms of keeping that project together. And I've learned a lot and copied many of her ideas in my work package as she's leading a different work package. So that has been very inspirational and very, educational, just working with her on this project. And also I've been involved with her and Lindsay Sawyer in a British Academy writing workshop project on critical urban scholarship in Nigeria. And despite all of the hurdles that we've had to deal with COVID and with funding transfers, again, I remember very clearly some of the things that she said to the participants in our online workshop, which I also learned a lot from and haven't forgotten. And it was palpable how much admiration and respect there was for her among those participants in that workshop, even though we were doing it online. So those are a few things I wanted to share in terms of my personal experience of working with Professor Lawanson. But also it's just been fantastic to engage with her work and to re-engage with some of it in the run-up to this event. I don't have a lot of time, but just to mention a few things. Obviously, her recent work with you, Oluwafemi, on the urban paradox in Lagos is such a fantastic piece in terms of crystallizing, I think, nailing so many of the issues that people have talked about, not only in relation to Lagos, but elsewhere. And the fact that so many people have celebrated Lagos as this success story, and yet there have been such clear injustices when it comes to the urban majority has been talked about a lot, but in that paper, you really nail it in pure and simple terms. I can't think of any, in a way, better representation of that than the quote in the paper where you say that the urban paradox is that the urban development decisions by the Lagos state government to provide housing for citizens ultimately resulted in them becoming homeless. And the way in which you kind of capture that in that paper and in a number of other pieces is very striking, including, I think, the work that Professor Lawanson has done on evictions in Lagos, going back to the Morocco eviction in 1990. So there's been a lot of international attention to the evictions in the last few years. But in that piece of work, you really take a long view of the effects of eviction over decades, which is quite unusual because people tend to focus on the most recent events and the most recent evictions. I also, I've been working a little bit around issues of special economic zones and industrial parks in other parts of Africa. So, it's striking that in the work with Muyiwa Agunbiande on the free trade zone in Lekki, Professor Lawanson's work there, again, seemed to be ahead of the game. They were writing about this before a raft of other work on these issues has come out. And as with the work on the evictions, it's really, impressive, the meticulous documentation of injustice in those cases and the meticulous attention to the mismatch between what is written in the policies, in the MOUs, in the regulations, and what happens on the ground, I think is a theme that really runs through Taibat's work on unpacking those urban injustices. Again, in a way that I think is also really bold and impressive in its range of different issues. And I just want to end by commenting on a piece of work that I hadn't read until I was preparing for this session. So it was great it was shared with me and I wasn't really aware of it. And that was this work on Pentecostalism and urban planning and urban space, which was just a fantastic piece of work, wonderful to read in terms of, I remember when in Lagos, people talking about the Pentecostal churches. Of course, you can't avoid this. People know how closely linked it is to politics. But to me, this seemed to be like opening up new horizons for research, not just in Nigeria, but elsewhere, to focus on the spatial dimensions of that. The huge consequences when you see, on the one hand, places the size of Vatican City or bigger than Monaco, essentially bigger than a country, that are owned and controlled by the church. And what that means for land ownership and citizenship, and the way that in that work you analytically break down these different kinds of religious urbanisms, I think is really going to be very influential and very exciting for those of us involved in urban studies anywhere, really. So I think I'm coming up to time. I don't want to run over, so I'm going to end there. But again, thank you very much for letting me be part of this.
Thank you so much, Tom. We really appreciate your time and your reflection on the work of Professor Taibat Lawanson. And that's really impressive. I mean, you have painted everything so well. I mean, the paper was circulated. And something probably when we have another round, there are a few things that we can follow up on that. I mean, from what you presented and what I was thinking about when I was preparing for this. So very quickly, we'll move to the second panelist on our agenda who will be reflecting today. And that will be Professor Marie, and she's from University of Witwatersrand. So nice to see you, Marie. We're really happy to have you and for accepting to be part of this panel. So I'll quickly read a citation, and after that, she will have the room to reflect. So Professor Marie teaches in the School of Architecture and Planning at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. She shares the role of PI on the WIT-TU Berlin Unilag Urban Lab with Professor Fana, Professor Taibat Lawanson, and Professor Philippe. She is the current director of the Center for Urbanism and Built Environment Studies at WIT University. Our research and publication included 3 single-authored books on housing and informal settlement policy, tenement, and the right to the city, and spanned in Brazil, South Africa, and Kenya. So, Professor Marie, you have the floor to reflect on Professor Taibat Lawanson's scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, I'd also like to say what an honor it is to be part of this panel. Thank you for inviting me. And so what I really value in Taibat's work is an ability to eloquently assemble, synthesize, and clarify existing knowledge, and to locate Lagos within this, whether it's understandings of grand narratives of development, neoliberalism, or globalization, or real-life processes such as Pentecostalism, evictions, dispossession, gentrification, and other forms of almost day-to-day production and intensification of inequality. With a pending visit to Lagos in September by Prof. Fana and myself, and by the whole team of the WITS-TUB Unilag project and our students, this particular session is timely for us. So through Prof. Lawanson's work, we're getting our heads around Lagos, breaking down our own South African misperceptions, and opening our eyes to a world we weren't quite aware existed, despite our privilege of regular engagement with Prof. Lawanson and several of her colleagues through the project activities, and right now through a joint book writing project, a collective book we're putting together. Prof. Lawanson's scholarship brings Lagos to life. From my perspective, one cannot understand everyday engagements without insights and frames Prof. Lawanson's work provides. I'll make this point through a very simple structure: context, concepts, positions, and implications. So let me start with context. So we get to start, through her work, we get to understand Lagos as a megacity, as caught up in binaries, formal, informal, global, local, governance versus survival, government versus people in terms of needs and so on, paradoxes, and Prof. Goodfellow spoke to those, legacies of legacies of structural adjustment policies, the uncritical balance of market, the uncritical embrace of market logic in policies, and that refers to your work as well, megacity projects, including free trade zones, and tied to this, the rationales for slum evictions and destruction. And then the pervasive trend of Pentecostalism. This too is a trend with a neoliberal and unofficial globalization dimension, a global movement with economic networks. It is also visible in the various iterations and intensities in other African countries and beyond, South Africa being no exception. The spatial implications for Lagos deserve the attention Prof. Lawanson's work has afforded it. This defies land use planning regulations in breadth, in breathtaking dimensions. And so we see competing demands on land, whether for free trade zones, Pentecostal facilities, all of them bypassing justifiable rationalities and agreed policy undertakings. Particularly astounding for the uninitiated as ourselves from South Africa, this camp or religious, these camp or religious gated estates through which planning is bypassed, informally coordinated, manipulated, binded. It's a scary prospect for, and that's to borrow Fanon's words, this Africa to come. So turning to concepts, conceptually, Lawanson's contributions take us through a whirlwind of conflicting rationalities. She employs land governance as a dynamic concept, as a lens that makes neoliberalism tangible, and that is embedded in a geopolitical dimension, in geopolitical dimensions, as we see China as an investor in the Lekki free trade zone, imposing spatial standards and so on. Prof. Lawanson invokes agency as something that is not necessarily benign, for instance, in the case of certain religious institutions and their hold over urban planning. The right to the city is made relevant in the most callous stripping of urban human dignity, slum eradication. I applaud this, as I've been at pains in my own scholarship on the right to the city to push back against the northern interpretations that wish to deny any connection between Henri Lefebvre's right to the city and human rights. And beyond the stripping of dignity, Prof. Lawanson's work tells of opulent development, once again bypassing formal development and clawing itself onto ostensibly undevelopable land, illegally, previously or once illegally occupied by slum, with apt levels of outrage hidden behind her always respectful academic prose. Prof. Lawanson points to accumulation by dispossession. And now turning to her position. Through her publications, we see Prof. Lawanson holding the state to account, upholding the town planning profession, and she presents the thick challenges that urban planning has to deal with. She raises unanswered questions, setting out a rich research area or agenda for scholars of Lagos and beyond. So what are the implications? What does the scholarship mean for urban planning and management? In terms of pedagogy, and this is something that the WITS TUB Unilag project is asking itself, students need to know and understand these dimensions, but essentially Prof. Lawanson's work also renders the planning profession and urban management as assumed in its ideal form, toothless in the face of the real dynamics and interests that steer the megacity such as Lagos. How does one prepare for a career in this losing game? These are questions we grapple with, for instance, in our own unsuccessful collaborative pursuits within Cubes over many years to have judgments implemented that order the implementation of upgrading of informal settlements policy. Normatively, whether in Lagos or Johannesburg, a battle was won in adoption of policies and even in the allocation of funding. But the real battle is at a different level, and one has to concede that the prospects for victory are not very good. So beyond pedagogy, what does this mean for the larger prospects of reaching the SDGs in the next 8 years? Thanks so much. That's my contribution here.
Thank you, Marie. We really appreciate that for, bringing everything to light, from contest to theoretical contribution, and how she has been able to push forward the knowledge regarding understanding maybe the issue of eviction, the issue of governance in Africa, and through the lens of Lagos. So I think there will still be an opportunity to go another round for something that is very germane to you as well, which reflect in most of your work as well. So there will still be opportunity to engage with that as we move on. So we go very quickly to the third panelist. So So, and the third panelist is Professor Abdulmalik Simon. I'm not sure if he's in the house. Professor Simon, are you here? Yeah?
He's in there.
Is what?
He's in there.
I'm here, man.
Oh, okay, great, because I've been looking at the screen. Great. And before I read Professor Simon's citation, I want to congratulate you on your new book that just got published with Duke University. And I want everyone to engage with this book. It's very interesting, though I've read I've read part of it, seen it. So, and I think we've engaged on this and discussed briefly on the book. And finally, the book is out. So I will encourage every one of us to look at the book and read it. So before I read the citation, I just want to bring it to the attention of the audience as well, our participants, that you will have opportunity to ask questions. Please just post your question in the chat box or comment. If you have any comment, please do put it in the chat box. We will be checking it and we will read it out at the appropriate time. Either something you want to direct to one of the panelists is welcome. So we are happy to have that. And we thank you so much. So we progress. So Professor Abdulmalik Simon is a senior professorial fellow at the Urban Institute, University of Sheffield. He works on the issue of spatial composition in extended urban regions, the production of everyday life for urban majority in the global south, infrastructure imaginaries, collective effect, global blackness, and histories of the present for Muslim working class. He's also a visiting professor at the African Center for Cities, University of Cape Town, research associate with the Rujak Center for Urban Studies in Jakarta, and research fellow at the University of Tarumanagara. His work deals with the multiplicities of propositions and capacities for relationship that remains untapped in popular districts across urban Asia and Africa, even though they are deployed every day. This is not a matter of celebrating the informal. It is not a matter of the subaltern getting their due. So, Professor Abdulmalik Simon, nice to have you, and you had the room to reflect on Professor Taibat Lawanson's scholarship. Thank you.
Thanks, Femi. And thanks for using a picture that when I was 20 years younger. I appreciate the gesture. I guess it's some indication of Lagos and some indication of Taibat's academic commitment that I usually see her riding in a car. So I'm glad to see Taibat somehow still today. What I garner from Taibat's collective work is something that's not for me easily named. And it's not a matter of Taibat's inability to name things. As a matter of fact, what I really appreciate about her work is the extent and the commitment to name things. So the way in which she names Ilabari, Oroke, Apapa Ileko, Igbaseri, Apese, Olokotun, Iru, Tukuru, Moba, Famayiwa, Idiroko, and others and others and others. She names places in Lagos that were specific places of inhabitation with their own specific ways of doing things, their own specific practices, their own histories of settlement and local authority, their own internal antagonisms and collaborations. And from this kind of naming, one is reminded of the importance of the way in which one trajectory of Lagos's development is based on scores and scores of specific places that each try to do something more than simply survive on their own terms. Often we're not able to do so. Often we're absorbed within larger names, larger districts, larger senses of places. But it's indicative of her commitment as a kind of urban historian, is to make sure that we are aware and recognize and acknowledge the specificity of these kinds of contributions. She also names other things. She names agencies and institutions and developers and churches and ministries and foreign investments. So what is so striking about the work across many different kinds of scales and subjects is the specificity of these names. You know, who are they? What do they have in mind? What are they able to do? What are they able not to do? What kind of impact do they have? What kind of relationship do all of these things that are named have with each other? And I state this because it's, even though Taibat herself will oftentimes invoke notions of neoliberal urbanism or informality, what is the real depth of her work is the ability to specify a field, a landscape, an atmosphere, a kind of trajectory of Lagos's development that entails a history of real interactions between all of these things that are named. And it's not an easy task to do this. These are complicated names in many respects. They have complicated interactions with each other. It's oftentimes so much easier to attribute the development and the operation of Lagos to more of categories or larger global forces. And it's not that those categories and larger global forces aren't relevant, but in order to really come to terms with Lagos, you have to come to terms with this very complex field of multiple interactions amongst things that are named. And I think this, you know, from the work that she's done in many different kinds of funded projects, the work that she's done on that's been mentioned already by Marie and Tom, that what you get from the collective sense of this work is something about an urban region that, despite all of the specificities of those things named, you can't quite name what the end result is. You have a kind of complicated, heterogeneous atmosphere, landscape, politics, built environment, cultural environment, social environment that intersects in ways that are oftentimes very difficult to name. But yet, you know, she takes this on. And she takes this on in part because of a commitment to name as much as possible, as much as she can, about the specific kinds of places and actors that she has attempted to engage over a long period of time. And I think that this has contributed enormously in terms of the institution building that has taken place within her department at the University of Lagos, and her commitment to develop this institution over time. I mean, there are, you know, we well know of things that came before her. We well know of, you know, the Lagos Group for the Study of Human Settlements, some of whose members like Tade Aina and Babatunde Ohonse and Cyril Obi went on to have illustrious international careers. And I don't fault them for that, but Taibat has stayed. Taibat has remained within the University of Lagos and really done a great deal to develop this as a kind of platform, as we see some of her students and her colleagues today. So I consider her to be then the real inheritor of the wisdom of Akin Mabagunji, perhaps Nigeria's most renowned urbanist. And I think more than anyone else, Taibat follows in his footsteps and takes that work in places that have not been taken before. And for this, I am very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate your reflection on that. And I mean, for painting it very well. I mean, the kind of boldness she has in saying it the way it is and naming institution when it is necessary to do that. And I think that actually came out very strongly in work and a publication and even everyday engagement to actually engage with institutions in Lagos. And thank you so much for saying that. And we appreciate that. So as I said, Professor Abdul Malik Simon new book, I've just posted it in the chat book in case you are interested. Please, I'll encourage you to engage with it. And I have to say as well, I think Professor Abdul Malik is also a co-director in the lab which I belong to, the Inhabiting Radical Housing Lab, so based in Turin. So he's a co-director, and we will be organizing another session after this, just by half 7 by 7:30, which the lab is organizing. We encourage you to join us there. I will send the link here so you can join us just immediately after this in another room. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll go to the next panelist who will reflect on this.
Oh,
yeah.
right.
So we have Professor Ola Uduku in the room who will be reflecting on Professor Taibat Lawanson's academic work and engagement within the urbanist and also within the professional. So I will read a citation very quickly, and after that, she will have the room. So Professor Ola Uduku became head of Liverpool School of Architecture in October 2021, taking on the role from being research chair in architecture and acting head of school at the Manchester School of Architecture between 2017 and 2021. Prior to this, she was reader in architecture and Dean International for Africa at Edinburgh University. Richard specialism in architectural modernism in West Africa, the history of educational architecture in Africa, and the contemporary issues related to social infrastructure provision for minority communities in cities in the West and South. Please welcome Professor Ola Uduku as she takes the room to reflect. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope everybody can hear me. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I think it's unusual, certainly in, I guess, British academia, to have a kind of FET script, but I think it's very important. And I really commend you for putting together this panel. And indeed, I think if of all people, Taibat is the person we need to celebrate. And I feel really privileged and honored to be invited to reflect on her research. And I would say her other activities as well. I think probably I'm reflecting more on the heritage and urbanism focus, which is where we've worked most closely, but there are other parts of Taibat's career insofar as I've known her over the past 3 to 4 years that I think are also relevant and which I will reflect on in this short discussion. So first of all, I think of all of us here, I'm probably the one who met up with Taibat almost accidentally. I was very much involved, or I still am involved in supporting writing skills and developing emerging postgraduate students and students in the area of architecture and urbanism. And I'm also very interested in heritage. It so happened that we were working on a project, which we didn't get, a GCRF project, but in the scanning and scoping of people whom I might want to collaborate with, I found out about Taibat. And I think everything I found out and more have been totally true. And I think this is the thing that I would say about Taibat. She's very much able to just get on with it. You know, you make a phone call to Taibat, and if she's able and willing, she's able to just go on with the project and support it thoroughly. I was most impressed. I am British Nigerian by heritage, and the stories from some parts of, you know, academia on this side is Lagos is absolutely impossible to work with, and so on and so forth. I think Taibat is a shining example as to how it is possible to work within the academic environment in Nigeria, I would say, but particularly in Lagos. And it is people like Taibat who have made this possible. I think, as has been said, there are many before her who have gone on to have glittering careers elsewhere, but Taibat is grounded. Taibat very much, I think, exemplifies the positive and dynamic role of research in Africa, particularly in Lagos and Nigeria, which is, you know, doing very well, thank you very much, despite notions of otherwise. So in the case of the writing workshop, which I will talk about briefly, I mean, Taibat supported it. This was something separate from the Heritage Project, which we started to get to know ourselves with quite closely. She supported the project, which was located in Ghana, but we were really interested in collaboration. Taibat supported three postgraduate students from Lagos flying over to Ghana to join the writing project. I think her dedication and support to those students has gone on to develop what became a joint Nigeria-Ghana writing project that we had British Academy funding for last year. So these things are continued and consistent. And all the reports, to be honest, that I've ever heard from Taibat are positive. So there must be something there. This is not, as Yorubas would say, Ojuaye. Clearly, you're in that space. And that is really, really important, because this moves me on to the whole ideas around equity, justice, and areas of empowerment, which again, I think we're all on the same page with Taibat about, but I think in her position in Lagos, this is absolutely critical. She's incredibly fair. She supports her students wherever they're from, whatever the background is. We've, in the collaborative projects we've done with students, we always look at the issues around gender, where they're from. In fact, I would say in a much more critical mode than a lot of the work we are being told to do on this side of the Atlantic. So the idea again that these issues only happen in the West or in the Western research is not true. There are certainly champions of this in Nigeria. When we talk about urban research, it's been really great to work with Taibat and also Tom on the ACRC project. I think this is a very multifaceted project, as both Tom and Taibat will say to you, but I think this was the first time I'd actually had to collaborate with her in writing. And it is, again, I think more to her than myself that the blog we wrote for the conversation on Lagos pretty much went viral. And I think that just shows, I think, both her ability to engage and communicate the day-to-day problems of Lagos, and also her scholarship, the fact that she's got a readership across the world now, mainly also due to the collaboration she's had with countries with universities in Southern Africa, but also in the West. So collaboration is nothing new to Taibat. She's been very much in the forefront of that. And back to justice, the issue about NSARS, I was really impressed with the ways in which some of the, if you like, the political issues that I think certain researchers or certain areas would not want to bring forward, Taibat has never been backwards in coming forward. So she makes the points, and she's able to evidence the issues that are sometimes considered, let's say, non-political or amoral. They're not areas that people particularly want to raise. So I think that ability to do that is something that also stands her in good stead. I think also just the issues about mentoring and working together and collaboration is something that with Taibat, myself and Marie, we're part of a joint editorship panel, and despite our activities, our individual activities, the ability to work together is something that I think has always been instilled by Taibat. And I always feel in safe hands if I'm working with Taibat on anything. Her publications speak for themselves. But I think what's important now is this, I think that what I call the mentoring role, which is nothing terribly new in the word, but I think this is somebody who actually does the mentoring. We don't just talk it. Taibat actually goes through it. And I think that's the thing about Taibat. I think those who are involved with her realize that not only is she the so-called safe pair of hands, she will look at this situation, she will take her her own situatedness, and particularly when it is to do with Lagos, her analysis of the situation is something that I think we all have to take heed of, because she's been very much embedded in the social politics and geography of Lagos, because also part of the ACRC was writing the Lagos report, which was, was an eye-opener for me as well. And she certainly keeps herself up to date in terms of the research material, but also in terms of the current and present trends. So I think this is the time to celebrate in some ways, having done the cynical dry at the beginning to say, well, we don't do FET scripts that much. I think if you don't do a FET scripts when people are young, when are you going to do it? And I think this is a time for us to really celebrate what Taibat has done so far. But indeed, as my beloved professor ahead of me has just said, if Mabogunje could do that, our Iya here can do even more. And she has the support of an international audience. And also Taibat, we've still got that Corona School project to do, just in case you've forgotten about it. But it's been great. And I think, this is a really, really august group of people who are reflecting on your work so far, but also to whom much is given, much is expected. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ola Oduko. And I think probably before we go to next round or the next person, I think I want to particularly emphasize the area of mentorship that you mentioned. I think it's really, the testimony is there in terms of being a good mentor. A lot of people have benefited from that. From her, both young and mid-career, academia and professional, and those even the emerging senior scholar now. So they've benefited so much in mentorship. And I think probably, to say it openly, one of those, that have benefited from that as well. At least, one of those that we met in Ghana for a project. Yeah, so, and I've benefited from that. And many others were across the globe, beyond Africa. So we need to actually recognize that and celebrate that. And also, connection and the way she has contributed also reflected in that when we were thinking of doing this, and because my thinking was that, who are the people we can invite? Okay, we need to invite those who are really doing the work, who are on the field, working on Africa. And when we listed the names, I was thinking, hopefully we'll get response. But we were surprised the kind of responses that we got. The excitement that no, we need to celebrate her. So that actually showed a kind of, the kind of person she is, that across the board. So people actually engage with her work. So thank you so much, everyone. And I think, I'm not sure if Fana is here now. Is Fana here?
He isn't, but he could speak through my mic and the phone. Shall we try that?
Okay, yeah, please.
He's been
let's
listening to
try
the
that.
proceedings. Okay.
So let's try it, hopefully. So that's our last panelist for tonight. Then we can have time for other questions. Yeah. So can you please display this?
Anna, they'll introduce you quickly.
Okay. So I would like to read his citation as well. So sorry for the trouble. It's one of those infrastructural challenges that we're still facing, and I hope we'll get over it so very soon. So Professor Fana is a full professor and the director of the planning program in the School of Architecture and Planning. He lectures in development economics, planning theory, and local economic development. He is a member of South Africa Council of Planners, South Africa professional body, which encompasses principally the interface between development and urban studies, and covers a wide range of theoretical, applied, and policy arena in the global as well as Africa realms of development. Over the years, he has worked and published in areas of land reform, planning gender, spatial development, urban politics, local economic development, community development, and African city. It is my pleasure to welcome Professor Fana. Please, you have the floor. I hope we will be able to get through the phone. Yeah, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just wondering if you can hear me.
Yes. We'll try.
Okay, that's great. Just let me know when you cannot hear me so that I can try and position myself. Once again, good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for this invitation to reflect and share on Professor Lawson's work. First of all, I want to congratulate her for reaching this milestone. In South Africa, we often say it's not a picnic to Maholisburg. So I guess in Nigeria, you could say it's not an outing to Taibat Bay Beach or something like that. So it is a great honor indeed. I can reflect a lot on Taibat, the person, but because of limited time, I'm just going to focus on her work. I read 5 articles of hers, and I'm going to go through 5 points. There's more, but I'm just going to go through 5 points that I've put down. So for a start, maybe with the first one, I want to read a quotation from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, a Nigerian novelist. She writes, "The single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are not true, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story." So for a start, I think what Taibat does with her work is that she unsettles the single story. She actually paralyzes this single story and opens up to the story of the other. And her work speaks for itself, as some previous presenters have actually indicated. I find her work to resonate and contribute to Southern urbanism or Southern scholarship. It questions the colonial legacy. It questions the neoliberal nation building that has become so popular around the world. And I think her work really is situated at a position where Southern scholarship can begin to articulate the location, the experiences, the practices, and situatedness of the so-called global South in general, but in particular the African condition, as it were. I want to move on to say I find Taibat's work to be situated, and I don't want to be reductionist here, but I can actually position it between David Harvey, Alkin Mabugunje, and Vanessa Watson. Why Harvey? As I was reading these articles, I could pick up all these terminologies and concepts such as accumulation by displacement, creative destruction, urban neoliberalism, the right to the city. Those concepts and many others resonate and keep coming out time and time again in her work. And I could see Makobunje really reflected in her work as well. And maybe I can even mention Abdul Malik Simon, who's also part of the panel, in terms of really digging deep to the depth of the local narrative, providing profiles of the local, and revealing detail of the local histories. And I think Abdul Malik Simon also made this point as much as possible. I like it in particular when she talks about Pentecostal neoliberalism, getting into the detail of what goes on with these religious practices, as it were. And the Vanessa Watson bit, I think, comes in when she starts questioning Western universalist ideas, the urban, when she's questioning the colonial hegemony of Western thought. And I think that brings in her writing, whether she's writing about the economic, the social, the political, and so forth, and so forth. In particular, I like the area where she questions state blind obedience to the market, especially where she was writing about land governance and megacity projects. I found that to be very, very rich. I can go further and say that Taibat's work is very rich. She's passionate about her city, Lagos, and she reflects about the inequalities, poverty, right to the city, religion, policy, and so on and so forth, and looks at the purveyors of justice as it comes from investors or even as it comes from government. She gives us and contributes to a rich understanding of Lagos, multiple dimensions of Lagos. She puts her hand on the pulse of Lagos to tell us about its heartbeat, its heartaches, its headaches, its destroyed organs, its hopes and despairs. She makes no referrals, hopes of survival, but sometimes pending death, even its obituary, that is obituary of the city. If, for example, you look at the article where she speaks about Makoro in 1990, 300,000 people displaced, 10,000 households rendered poor, 15,000 buildings actually destroyed. This speaks so much about her passion and about her concern with the local and with the ordinary person. I see her work actually searching for the African being who's located in the city, the African subjectivities, the African condition within an urban realm. And she's very dynamic in the sense that she doesn't see the African as being singular, but very diverse. She takes us to where they are, what they are doing, even whether they have jobs, but in particular, when they are out of jobs. What affects them? In what ways? Look at, again, the articles on land government and megacity or governing today's Lagos. Those articles are very, very revealing. I think Taibat writes with a conscience and with precaution. She doesn't generalize. She questions the false promise of capitalism or neoliberalism, as it were, nowadays. She decries the disproportionate influence of the market, if not its gangster proclivities. She looks at state-sponsored evictions and questions the state to its core of its conscience. She questions the state's blind obedience to the market. And I think this begins to open a way not only to question neoliberalism, but to say where to from here. I think Taibat's work gives us a particular, useful richness. She is concerned with encounters and their consequences, whether it's encounters between the global and the local, between the state and the people, between the private sector and the community. This is all embarked and reflected in her work. And underlined on this is concern about urban citizenship as defined by the right to the city, the need for equality, fairness, and justice. I think her work really speaks to all of us, and it speaks to a number of disciplines, but as well informs what is possible when we look at the local and the global. And I just want to conclude by stating Hook's statement: the soul is our politics. The soul is our politics. The soul in our politics is the commitment to ending domination. And I think Taibat's work encapsulates this and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that for reflecting on that. And I think there's something you mentioned in particular, which of course is being on my mind that probably we need to reflect on, which each panelist will be able to reflect on. Though we've got a lot of questions, but I know time may not permit us to go through all that. But there's something that is very general that which everybody can actually respond to. It's the issue of decolonization, which is a big thing now in the continent of Africa and probably by extension the global South. That where there's time to decolonize knowledge, and also in terms of how we know things. And this trope is actually going on within African continent. And it has always been that, maybe the Africa, they've not come of age and there are no critical scholars from Africa. That's the general notion from the West. But now we come to see that there are a lot of people actually coming up, challenging this position. And I'm probably thinking that as we said, Professor Lawanson is also within this space, decolonizing. So I just want us to reflect, situating our work within this space, decolonizing. How do we think our work is actually engaging with this, and how this can actually move that discourse forward, that we can know that, one of the Africa from Nigeria is actually reflecting within this area and is pushing the boundary forward in terms of decolonization of knowledge and the way we do things. So not in any particular order, but I will just go the way I see it on the way I see the name on the screen, how our work is contributing to decolonization of knowledge in Africa. So probably I will start with Tom, if you can go just briefly, like a few minutes. Yeah.
Yes, I will have to be brief because I'm literally I've got to fly out in a moment. So this is a question on how her work has contributed to decolonization of knowledge in Africa. Yeah. Well, in a very simple sense, if you just look at the work that Taibat has done, she has been, as I said, kind of leading the debate on a number of things that global North scholars working on Africa have often then followed on. So just by virtue of the work she's been doing, she's turning things around and really bringing arguably the most significant city in Africa, putting that at the center of the debate from the position in Lagos, as various people have mentioned. So I think, intrinsically her work, and it's been influential for so many people around the world in the global North and South, that in some sense that distinction ceases to be relevant. But in another sense, I think she's kind of a clear example of being rooted and remaining loyal and committed to her context. So I think, the comparisons with Mabagunje are very valid. And I don't know. I'll hand over to others, partly because I'm halfway out the door. But I've been so honored to be part of this, and I'm sorry not to be able to stay till the end.
No, we really appreciate that. I think you said it before. So on behalf of the organizer, in case you leave at any point in time, we want to say a big thank you to you for making it to be here today and for reflecting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'll go to
Taibat for all her work, great work. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll go to Marie, please.
Thanks so much. Yes, so I'll also just say a few words, but I think one thing that Taibat definitely does, and it's something we exploring together in this book project of ours, in this BITS TUB UNILAG project, is disrupting narratives and with that disrupting hierarchies. And I think what you're doing here, what you've arranged today, is disrupts those hierarchies, in that the way you're putting Taibat on the map, but Taibat's already put herself on the map from the periphery, really, and that does break down the North-South hierarchies I would like to say that Taibat does that with the greatest of grace, and with such a warmth that she doesn't personalize the decolonization and embraces scholars from around the world, whether north south, whether from marginalized areas or not. And I think that speaks to her quality, that decolonization doesn't become a personal kind of almost like a vendetta, but something that's natural in her work, that's natural in her personality. I think I like, for instance, that when she talks about human rights, it is just natural for her to talk about the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, because that's the relevant framework for this continent, and one that needs to be elevated. And it is about collective rights to a large extent rather than individual rights. And so when I see that in her work, I kind of see that as well as a pushback against perhaps some of the northern framings that would belittle, that have been belittling the relevance of collective rights in particular. So I'll leave it at there, and because we are needing short inputs now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think before I go to the next panelist, I will want to read a few of some of the comments. A lot of comments are here. I'm not sure if we can all see the comments in the chat area. So I would just want to read a few of them as probably part of testimony of, the kind of person Professor Lawanson is and academic work. I think I'm from Oluchi. Professor Lawanson is a big inspiration, especially to young ladies in the planning field. And I think that is really good to know, and is a testimony of our work and our mentorship. So I think another one also from Esther said, as Professor Taibat is indeed an ardent supporter of both undergraduate and postgraduate students. Most time, she believes in every student she comes across. I can also attest to the fact that she is a good mentor. Congratulations, Professor Lawanson. So, and another one from Rethinking Cities. And it says, Professor Taibat's recent endeavor to use documentary film making as a channel of communicating findings to me as a filmmaker is laudable, and for reaching in generating public discourse. A typical example is the documentary Lagos Ownership and Identity, which she co-produced. I celebrate you, Ma. So that's another testimony of who she is. So there's another one here from Nura. It said, Lagos, okay, this year I came to Lagos for the first time to start field work. Professor Taibat Lawanson had already invited me to a workshop the day after I landed. This event was immensely helpful in meeting activists and researchers in my area of study, as well as interview partners. And I even made friendship. I didn't know how the start of my work would look like, but I definitely didn't picture such a warm welcome to Lagos community, literally from day one. Thank you for that, Professor Taibat Lawanson. So maybe at this point, I will pause to go to Abdul Malik. If you can just reflect on that, talking about how our work might probably is contributing to the truth of decolonization within the African context. Yeah.
Well, my old friend, the late Tandika Makandawira, who was to be the former executive secretary of Codestria some years ago, would often talk about the double bind that many young African scholars faced. That is, on the one hand, if they were to emphasize the kind of singularity of their urban experiences, or their experiences as Africans dealing with the context in which they had to operate. If they invented their own language, they weren't heard, they weren't listened to, they were easily dismissed. And on the other hand, the other aspect of the double bind is that when they then try to utilize, deploy the language, that the hegemonic language of economic and social analysis, that they were always considered lesser, inadequate versions of what the real standard was. So you know, young African scholars were often between a rock and a hard place. And you'd go to conferences and workshops, and a lot of the younger scholars would simply regurgitate whatever the predominant gospel at the time. And then people would retire to the bar afterwards, and then you'd get the real story, then you get the real analysis, then you get the real sense of things. And I think that what Taibat has done in her commitment to a particular kind of pedagogy and mentorship, and a kind of brave and courageous model that she displays for her students, is to get out of that double bind, to get out of that sense that in some ways that there are very specific kinds of trajectories, processes, stories of urbanization that are Africa and Africa's alone, and that they contribute a very singular point of view to collective urban knowledge. And for young students, particularly to own that, to not have to prove themselves always in terms of a kind of standard which is not oftentimes very relevant to the kinds of urbanization processes underway. And so I think that her commitment to, in a sense, putting the kind of direct experiences, the vernaculars, the conceptualizations, the experiences of different aspects of African urbanization at the forefront, and to own it and to be honest and direct about it, has made an enormous contribution to a kind of politics of knowledge that I think goes a long way to enable particularly younger scholars to sort of step out of this need to always mimic what they think is the kind of norm, never being really fully valorized for it, and also embracing the kind of singular perspectives and having the kind of skills and confidence to back that up. And I think this is what Taibat has made an enormous contribution in terms of stance, attitude, verve, a willingness to take on the world. And this is, I think, what's so inspiring, as you can see in the chat from many of her students.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. And I think probably that one actually will speak to, your own position being an advocate of decolonization, and also probably people from periphery speaking. So, and she's been very strong in this space. So thank you so much. So I think we're gradually moving to the end of the session. I think we have about 10 minutes thereabout now. But before I go to the next person, I want to say that what we are doing today is part one. So we've got part two with another set of scholars and professionals who will be reflecting and celebrating as well. And that will come up on Saturday, same time, 5:30 Nigerian Lagos time. So we want to encourage you to join us also on Saturday by 5:30, when we'll be doing part two with another set of scholars who will be reflecting on this. So Professor Ola Oduko, over to you.
Well, I think I can give a very practical story about decolonization and my interactions with Taibat. At a certain project, at a certain place that shall remain nameless, there was a feeling that the ways in which we the funding structure was working, just was not working for students in Africa who were involved in the project. And Taibat, like the rest of us, was particularly vociferous about the need to look at things from an equity and also from a realistic perspective. And it has been said that certain people from the West were concerned at the end of this, but this did not stop Taibat from being able to really, I would say, make clear the need for an equal set of relationships between those doing research in the South and those doing it in the North. But on a more serious note, I mean, I fully am in support of Taibat in terms of her views towards projects that need to have a viewing that is not colonial, I would say, in terms of the relationships. I think the projects that Taibat has been involved in show that it is possible to have equity in terms of how we do research and where credit is given and where credit is due. But importantly as well, the need for collaboration and the ability to show that the knowledge is not situated in one place. Knowledge is generally shared, and there's as much knowledge as has been said in the South, and the ways in which we discuss this knowledge are multifarious. So the idea that there is indeed just one story is not true. The stories are those that are able to be shared and those that are able to be evidenced. As we have said in the first round, the point about Taibat's research is that it is robust. It stands the test of time. It has as much valor as research that might have been done in Harvard, Cambridge, or any other high-ranking institution in the West. So the idea that knowledge in the South is in any way secondary is not something that Taibat tolerates, and she also makes sure that those to whom she mentors reach that standard. But importantly as well, I think as she attains the professorial role, she gives that ability, I think, for Africa to begin to speak again for itself, as probably Abdul Malik and a few of us will remember the days of, again, I don't know, again, I think sometimes they may indeed be rose-tinted glasses, but times there was when Ibadan did indeed have that status. And indeed, it is the likes of Mabo Gunje and others who elevated it to that status. Okay, fast forward, whatever it is, 30, 40 years, we are at a stage, I would say, in Africa where we need to claim back that space. And the way to do that, indeed, is to join the decolonization debate, but not just to shout about it, but to do things in relation to it. And what I find from Taibat's relationships, particularly when it comes to international negotiations around research and collaborations, is that she is able to stand up for what is possible, particularly indeed on her patch, which is the University of Lagos. But having said so, as I said, some of the work I've done more recently, we've looked at universities across Nigeria. So she's speaking not only for Lagos, but for the fact that indeed there is research and there are those who are able to do research in Africa, particularly in Lagos and in West Africa. So I think at that point I'll stop.
Thank you so much. I think I would testify to that as well, that she's an adherent of Africanization, if I can put it that way. And that also even speaks to one of the papers of Professor Fana. We're talking about global Africanization. You know, when I read that paper, and I was just putting Professor Taibat, that was thinking in that perspective as well. I'm not sure if Professor Fana is still able to connect. Okay, so maybe, well, thank you, our participants. We saw all your comments. I know time may not permit us to read all of this. I'm sure that the comment, people can actually see it and read. So we really appreciate that. But before we close, before we finish today, I know we have a few minutes so that we can change to another room.
We have Fana, if you still have a minute.
Sienna.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Fana?
Yes. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. I think let me start by saying that as I grew up high school, university, I was looking at the maps, atlas, and not just where I come from, but across Africa. And what I always questioned is the manner in which the names of places are written incorrectly, because they're written from a Western perspective of pronunciation, as it were. So I think if anything, Taibat begins really to correct this, to decolonize, just here, basic writing, she gets into talking about Tie, Ilenge, Imogido, and so on, as Abdul Malik Simon and other presenters pointed out. And it's the correct spelling. How decolonizing and affirming is that? For me, that really matters, because it begins to present the story of the other. It begins to actually push the narrative and redirect how we should value ourselves and affirm ourselves. As I indicated earlier, a single story creates stereotypes, to paraphrase Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And Taibat is writing about Lagos and writing about it from a local perspective. And I think that begins to decolonize the knowledge that has been dominant in histories of the local being told by people that have often not even been in the continent. Like the article where she talks about conflicting rationalities, imbuing Vanessa Watson's notion there, where she begins to look at how we really disrupt these various worldviews, and as I indicated earlier on, that these are Western universalist ideas of the urban. And I think when she talks about conflicting rationality, she's starting to open the spaces and open up the boxes where we need to find ourselves as Africans, but in particular as African scholars. I think her manner of versatility and composure and considered writing really helps us to disrupt, helps us to provide knowledge, and gives us the alternative worldview of what it means to be urban in Africa. So I think this is pushing, the agenda of decolonization in the African scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fana. We really appreciate that. So at this point, we are running out of time. So, and we want to appreciate everyone, our panelists and our audience who is joined and with your wonderful comments. We really appreciate that. But before we round it up, finally, I would like to give the room to Professor Taibat Lawanson, who we're celebrating today. So probably she has one or two things to say before we wrap it up. And for those who have joined now, we encourage you to come on Saturday as well, same time. And by 7:30, in the next 5 minutes, I've posted the link there. It will be an interesting discussion there as well. Please do join us. Yeah, Professor Taibat Lawanson, please.
All right, thank you very much, Femi. And let me start by thanking the organizers, Femi, Omo, and Taiwo. Femi happened to be the first master student I supervised, and we've continued to work hand in hand since then, I think 8, 9, 10 years ago. So thank you very much for putting this together. And I must thank the panelists, starting from Professor Abdul Malik, who I read about and then had the good fortune to meet along the line and to learn from him. Professor Olauduku, who opened doors for me. And I remember a statement she made when I was going through some hard times. She said to me, Taibat, I'm invested in your progress. And I took those words and ran with it. It's very comforting. I also thank Marie. Marie has been, one of the motivators who keeps saying, just hang in there, never mind. And then, she has also invested in my scholarship of her time, she has been a good supporter. Thank you very much to Fana, my friend, my urban theorist, and sincere thanks also to Tom, whom I've been working closely with in the past few years. I barely recognize myself in the words that have been said this evening. I'm very appreciative. And I've read comments in the chat room from students, from colleagues, from friends. And what this tells me is that the work that we've been doing is valid, but that there's still more to be done. Decolonization is a journey, it's a process. I dare say it is not a war that will be won with arms, but it is a war that will be won, with subtlety, with intellect, and with the superior argument. So what I will say, just by way of closing, is to thank everyone for the support, for the validation, and I look forward to doing more, to working with you guys and pushing African scholarship, the voice of the other, like Fana called it, naming places, like Abdul Malik said, and raising the next generation of Alkima Bukunjes, like Malik alluded to. Thank you very much for this honor. I deeply appreciate it. Back to you, Femi.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. So I think at this point, we can't appreciate our panelists enough, and our audience, we can't appreciate you enough. We thank you for making it this time and for celebrating Professor Taibat Lawanson. So part 2, as I said, will come up on Saturday, 5:30. So right about now, I'll be going to another room by 7:30. I've posted the link. Please join us there as we continue the conversation there on another issue. Thank you, and bye to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.